Live. Crystal, let's start with the economy and this incredible snippet of a new interview that Howard Lutnick gave. This is A0. Watch this.
Will these policies be worth it if they lead to a recession, even a short-term recession?
These policies are the most important thing America has ever had.
So it is worth it.
It is worth it. I don't think the only reason there could possibly be a recession is because of the Biden nonsense that we had to live with.
Okay, so JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs are now putting the likelihood of a recession around 40-60, so 40% likelihood of a recession. And you have massively wealthy people like Howard Lutnick, obviously Commerce Secretary there, saying a recession would be worth it. Crystal, this is, just to pause on this clip before we get to Sagar's question at the White House, it's the messaging, the optics, just on the surface level. You have a bunch of billionaires walking around saying, don't worry about it, it's worth it.
It's worth it. And it's worth it for what exactly? Like, that's the other piece, is I'm not sure that they've really explained what all of us, all of like regular Americans out there are meant to be sacrificing in service of, is the other piece of it, which is what we've talked about with the tariff policy, where Trump has had like 18 different explanations for why we're putting on tariffs, including making Canada the 51st state, something that was not proposed on the campaign trail and no one voted for, but, you know, suddenly is a major priority in U.S. policy, and you're supposed to suffer in order to make this happen. Like, it's insane. And, you know, there's a few things with regard to Lutnick here that are important to point out as well. I sent you guys this article yesterday from Politico. Apparently, Trump aides are preparing to throw Howard Lutnick under the bus for the, poor economic numbers and poor economic political standing of Trump. In fact, there's a new CNN poll out that has him at his lowest numbers ever in terms of how people feel he's handling the economy. I mean, obviously, this has been a traditional area of strength for Trump. It is arguably the core reason why people decided to reelect him as president of the United States. And now he is profoundly underwater there. His approval rating has slipped, decidedly negative, at least in terms of the CNN poll, significant movement there for Trump. Elon, even more profoundly unpopular with the American public. And so people are preparing to throw Lutnick under the bus and say, oh, this guy is doing crazy stuff. He's saying crazy things. And, a clip like this where he's like, yeah, recession, I think that's probably worth it. That certainly adds to their arsenal of what they'll use. But, it's never Trump's fault. It's always got to be someone else's fault if things are going sideways.
That's always an interesting line for the White House to walk, taking credit for the effects of the tariffs when they see them as positive, bringing jobs back to Indiana, for example, with the Honda Civic situation, or then shouldering making Howard Lutnick shoulder the blame when things go south. Let's listen to this question that Sagar got in at yesterday's briefing. Here he is talking to Caroline Levitt.
Today, we have Sagar Anetti, who is the host of Breaking Points, a popular political YouTube news and podcast show.
Really appreciate you having me, Caroline. A couple of questions for you, if I may. First on the stock market. So currently, it's the 25th anniversary today of the dot-com bubble crash. There's a lot of concern for a lot of Americans right now about the state of the economy. President Trump has refused to rule out a recession. Secretary Lutnick, however, has told us there will not be one. So can the White House just tell and assure Americans today that there's not going to be a recession?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So let me start by saying that, first of all, when it comes to the stock market, the numbers that we see today, the numbers we saw yesterday, the numbers we'll see tomorrow are a snapshot of a moment in time. And as President Trump has said, and I'm here to echo the remarks of this president of this White House, we are in a period of economic transition. We are in a period of transition from the mess that was created under Joe Biden in the previous administration.
So yeah, Crystal, that's really the new messaging, is this is a period of, quote, economic transition. And again, it's one thing to have Trump making that case. It's another thing to have Howard Lutnick and, non-Trump. Trump is such a singular figure, but to have other billionaires running around making that case, it's clearly the best that they've landed on, though.
Yeah, and I'm curious from your perspective, Emily. I mean, I think people were willing to give Trump a bit of a grace period. He came in hot, did a whole lot of stuff. People are like, all right, let's see where all of this goes. We're now 50 days into the administration, and I don't think that it is going to, I don't think people are going to buy that this is all Biden's fault, because because Trump has made so many moves, he has really taken ownership of everything that happens in the country, including what happens in the country economically. So I know they want to say like, oh, this is all Biden's fault, and so we've got to clean up his mess, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure his base will buy that, but I don't think that rationale is going to land very effectively, much beyond his sort of like hardcore supporters. Because like I said, because he has taken so much action, on the one hand, people sort of liked that sense of like, oh, things are happening. But now that things have turned and you're looking at recession and you're looking at days on days of stock market crashing and consumer confidence is down, we're actually going to get an inflation reading today that, a lot of people are anticipating. We'll see what happens there as well. But now that things are turning south, I think he is going to shoulder the blame because he's in charge and he really has, sort of taken hold of this thing in a way that's pretty undeniable.
It's interesting because, the style is part of the substance here. Obviously, for Trump, he's trying to keep things completely unpredictable. We talked about this actually after his joint address last week. Like, part of the plan here is so that nobody, even close analysts of this who watch, have any idea what you're doing, because that takes it to China and Canada and Mexico, and they have no idea what you're doing. And that's really the only way Trump thinks, the 51st state thing, for example, like he's really needling them. But that's also ends up being part of the substance when it comes to the market. So there was an interesting story in Reuters yesterday going around and actually talking to folks in Wisconsin and manufacturing in Wisconsin who would be affected by the tariffs. And we've seen this with farmers as well, Midwest soy and all of those different products in Trump's first term that were affected by tariffs, then continue to be affected by the Biden tariffs. You often hear, and it seems that you're still hearing, some patience with Trump's policies because there was an expectation that they would be radical, that they would be hard to predict, that they would be significant. And so people sort of prepared in advance. That's what Reuters was talking to some of these manufacturing and agriculture people about. They expected to not know what to expect. And so they had already started looking into their supply chain and all of that. But the question is, when does that truly wear off? And Crystal, when Donald Trump, he's tethered himself so closely to the market during his campaign and looking back on his first presidency that it may ultimately be one of the things that screws him in terms of the public perception. He's really going to have to find more cases like the Honda Civic. He's really going to have to find just all of these examples of jobs flooding back to the United States to make the case that we're in a, quote, transition period in a way that's successful, that successfully persuades voters who are looking at their portfolios or in their communities and going, oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, he's tied himself historically over the course of his career and certainly over the course of his first presidency to the markets. He's also in this presidency tied himself to Elon, who is increasingly profoundly unpopular and doesn't have some of the, Trump has magic powers when it comes to his political standing.
Yep.
We all know he can do things and say things, get away with things that literally no one else in history has ever done. Elon doesn't have quite those same powers. Now, Elon has his own powers. Obviously, he's got his own base and following and cult of personality. And in a certain way, he is a similar sort of branding genius in the same way that, that Trump is, just with a different kind of a flavor. But Elon doesn't have that same political Teflon that Trump does. Now, I think early on, the thought was that Elon could serve as a kind of a heat shield. So as he's making all of these dramatic cuts and imposing this radical austerity on the federal government, including in things that are really popular, like, for example, public education is really popular. We're talking about that. Social Security, really popular. Airplanes safely landing, really popular, They thought, I think, that Elon could sort of take the blame and, serve as this heat shield, as this sort of protective barrier. But the flip side of that is because Elon is taking on so much water without having that Teflon coating that Trump seems to, that it actually could have an increasingly negative impact directly on Trump and weigh him down in a way that he hasn't been weighed down in the past. I want to skip ahead and then we'll come back to the CNBC side. If we could put A3 up on the screen, because I thought this was interesting. This is from JL Partners.